You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Sterios and Crystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
Nicci, it's such a pleasure to have you here at My Inner Teacher podcast. We've known each other a long time, and there's a lot of personal history here. But just in the last year, I've come to know this more scientific and healing therapies side of you, and it's fascinating to me. And I'd like to kind of just dive right into it. This platform is about the inner teacher, and it involves leaning into places where we are relying on our own intuitive intelligence to guide us. And for many people, it's a mystery. It's an unknown place that we actually embody this wisdom that is our birthright, really. And so when we're dealing with healing opportunity, when we have an illness, and I like to refer to it as a healing opportunity, how do we interpret the sensations that we've kind of labeled as pain? How do we interpret those sensations in a way that helps guide us in the immediate situation that we're dealing with, which is whatever dysfunction is happening, but then carrying that maybe further into looking at how we live our lives? Like, is the way we're living our lives influencing this dysfunction? So I know that's a long question, but I'd like to kind of get right into it. So how does that sound?
Sounds great. Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Sure.
So my name's, as Peter said, Nicci Parry. I'm a functional medical practitioner here in the UK. And I have a very busy clinic here in Sussex and also in London. And I work as a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. And a lot of the work that I do at the moment is ancestral cranial work as well. And I teach yoga. So the way that I come into relationship, as it were, with somebody's condition, whether it be pain or whether it be dizziness or whatever it might be, is a deep listening. So craniosacral therapy in itself is a deep listening to the body. And then what I love about functional medicine is a deep listening to the body through data. So with my scientific hat on, I was trained as a scientist to start with. Functional medicine is so beautiful because it's almost like the cognitive side of craniosacral therapy, where we get all of that wonderful data about the gut or data about the blood or whatever it might be. And we get that full complement of information. So I think in order to answer your question, I'm going to use myself as an example. Recently, I've been really unwell with mold toxicity, which completely floored me. And to begin with, I didn't know it was mold toxicity, but I started getting really severe symptoms of fatigue. And I knew I was pushing myself. I knew I was going to take August off, and I was seeing lots and lots of clients. And I thought, right, I've just got to get through these next 2 weeks. And then, that's it. I can go splat. And what happened is I became very shattered. I was absolutely exhausted. And then I became very, very dizzy. And it was dizziness to the point where I couldn't walk. So even sitting down, I was dizzy, and, sitting there in clinic holding somebody's head or feet, I was still dizzy. And I thought, no, this has got to stop. And so I went into that sensation of dizziness. And to begin with, of course, it brings up a lot of fear because we don't know how long we're going to have the symptom, the pain, the dizziness, the fatigue, whatever it might be. And so for me, it's not about the what, it's about the how. How do we meet that symptom? Do we meet it with a mindset that's like, let's fix this. I've got to get through it. I've got to get over it. I need to get back to my normal. For me, it's doing it in a completely different way, where the how becomes what I like to call caring resolve. And so we're meeting it, and we're saying to it, okay, can I give you more space? This too is welcome. And really allowing ourselves the space to understand why the body is manifesting this particular pain, this particular symptom and giving it space and time to show us what it's trying to say.
Fantastic. Since you made it personal, and I want to ask you something personal, this listening, how in your situation, in this very current situation, how is that voice communicating to you? Is it literally a voice inside, or is it through imagery? How is, for you personally, how do you get confidence in the message?
Yeah, great question. Really great question. I love meditating. So I go into a quite deep meditative state. So I might even use, a guide. So I might use a online meditation to get me into that state sometimes. And then in that state, I will come into touch with this dizziness or with fatigue, and I will be very, very gentle with it. It's a bit like if anybody here has a meditation practice and you're following the breath. It's a bit like when you bring your awareness onto the breath. It's like bringing your binoculars onto a bird that's on a little bird bath. It'll often flutter away. It's holding that pain, whatever it is, with such gentleness. It's an invitation. And so I hold it with such care, and I soften around it, and I give it a lot of space, and it's an invitation where I say, this, you are welcome. This too is welcome. And then once the space is given, I ask it, I come into dialogue with it. So I say, what would you like to tell me, if anything? Is there anything that you would like to say to me, dear dizziness? In a really kind, positive way. And I did find out that what was going on with me is I had mold toxicity. I'd been exposed to mold, and we live in a very old house, and there was a bit of mold in our basement, and we had to get the whole house remediated, and I had to move out, and da-da-da. Anyway, so then I started talking to the mold, right? And, as human beings, we are walking species of trillions of species. If you think about it, we're not just the Homo sapien in which we are living in this physical body. There are millions of other bugs and beings that live with us, our gut microbiome, all of the other pathogens, or, all of the other viruses and everything that lives symbiotically in our body, including mold. And it just so happened this mold had come out of balance in me, and it was causing havoc. And so I think if we go into pain, or we go into a virus, or we go into mold, or whatever it might be, saying, I want to kill you, because that's ultimately what we are trying to do, get rid of it. It's not about that. It's about coming into right relationship. It's like treating, a baby, that's screaming and crying. You wouldn't sort of, shove the baby in another room and run away. You want to lovingly cradle the baby and look after the baby. And it's the same. It's the same thing with your back pain, or with a COVID virus, or, mold in my case. We come into right relationship with it because it is teaching us how to be in right relationship with ourselves. That's its teaching.
Yeah. And it probably, in that space, in that dialogue, the intuitive part of your mind is probably starting, oh, maybe if I take some of the intensity out of my schedule, or maybe if I say no to a few opportunities, that I also can contribute to this relationship with mold, or whatever imbalance that a person is dealing with. Oh, if I make some space in these other parts of me that are consuming, literally, there's more resources, healing resources within to that trillion cell, using Bruce Lipton's words, trillion cell community of our bodies that we are. There's more space for synchronicity more space for sustainable healing that is so intricate, complex, and really beyond our limited ability to understand the totality. It's literally an infinite system, but it knows what to do. It operates. It's operated for generations within an environment that's evolving, and now it's trust. It's what we say here, radical trust in this environment that we are.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you've just said. That's craniosacral therapy right there. Because the cranial rhythm is that energy within us that is always moving towards health, right? So the liver regenerates. The cells of the liver die and they regenerate. The same as the gut, the same as everything in our body. It's always regenerating. It's dying and then regenerates. And that energy behind that process is the cranial rhythm. So when we're holed up, like we might be in an illness or when we have pain, it's such a beautiful opportunity to go, oh, wow, I've been given this opportunity to go deep into pain, into mold, into COVID, into whatever it might be, and understand what it's trying to tell me. What areas of my life right now are just not working? Am I working too hard? I was working 7 days a week. I mean, it's ridiculous. Am I working too hard? Am I seeing too many clients? Am I spending time with my children and my husband? Seeing my family, seeing my friends? Am I in right relationship with things in my life that are meaningful to me? And I think that's what energy blueprint, the cranial rhythm, life, creativity, whatever we want to call it, it gives these opportunities along the way. And all we need to do is sit and listen.
Fantastic. Crystal, you've been very quiet.
Just waiting for my space to come in and ask some questions, but also the conversation has been very enlightening. I'm learning a lot and enjoying it. I do have a question more on the skeptical side because, of course, lots of people in this world are skeptical. I think more are skeptical than believe. And so I think it's worth exploring, like you mentioned, Nicci, talking to your body, talking to the mold, which for someone who has done that feels normal. And it feels like, yeah, why not? Because everything is connected, everything is energy, everything is frequency. But for those who don't operate in that way, I'm thinking of two things. Like, how do you explain scientifically talking to your body and actually getting a result from that? And also the part about stopping, giving space. Like you mentioned, you work 7 days a week, you're seeing all these clients, and the world we live in this physical realm is about, you need to work to make money, to pay the rent so you can eat, like that's just the way life is. And so how do you tell someone to take space when in their logical mind, they're like, I can't take space. I have bills due. I have these things that I need to, So it's this two-part question of like, what scientifically can you share about speaking to the body? And then how do you address giving time and space to this pain when life goes on?
So I'm not a quantum physicist, but the quantum physicists would answer your first question where, okay, let's put it another way. So we know from all of that beautiful work with water, for example, that if we put loving intention into water, that the crystals are absolutely beautiful. But if we put negative intention into water, then it's a completely different story, right? They look completely different. So we know that if our intention is loving and caring, and if we want to communicate that to ourselves, which we so rarely put ourselves last, right? And we expect others to heal us. So if you get sick, you often go to a doctor, or you go to an osteopath, or you go to somebody else, or you want to do talk therapy, so you go and talk to somebody else, and you're giving your power away, right? In a way, obviously you're getting their expertise and their experience to support you, which is fantastic, but you're giving that responsibility to another. I think to give the responsibility to yourself is incredible. And the science behind it is quantum physics. I don't, I don't know all the data and everything, but I just know from myself that, there's been a lot of studies of doing this talking therapy, where you could put a part of yourself into another chair in front of you, and you have this dialogue. And it could be you have the dialogue with the mold, or you have the dialogue with the pain in you. And you can resolve a lot of that just by coming into dialogue with it. And it's quite incredible, how you can do that. The second part of your question of having space, it's a great question, because the mold, when I was in dialogue with the mold in me, it gave me a very clear answer. It said to me that basically that instead of me working for money, that I need to start getting money to work for me. It was the other way around. And yes, you're absolutely right that we live in this fast-paced world, and now we've got AI to help us facilitate that. We have internet to help us facilitate that. I was talking to a friend yesterday who's a philosopher, and she was saying, but through AI, you're actually facilitating the fast-paced world. Like, do we really need or want AI to do that for us? Do you see what I mean? Like, do we want to facilitate this fast-paced world? I mean, the happiest I've ever been in my life was when I lived in Zambia on the Zambezi in a tent working as a safari guide. I had just the bare minimum there, and I was so happy. I didn't need loads of money in the bank. I didn't need, a particular handbag or particular this or car or house or whatever. I was so happy. And I think that's what, when you have these conditions or illnesses or times in your life where you have to stop, it's a time of evaluation. And it's so incredible. It's so incredible to have those stop times to say, actually, you know what? Do I really want to live like this? Do I need all of this? And
I find that this line of conversation so fascinating, because there's two polarities here. There's one, I've got all these things that I'm trying to juggle to pay the rent and eat and all these kind of basic things, and I'm doing the best I can. If we're not tending to self in the sense of the whole of ourself, not just the physical body, but the mental body, the emotional body, the physical body, and what yogis call the subtle body, which is more energetic. If we're not taking that time, in addition to all the things we're doing to survive, the body comes in and presents a different choice. And in a way, here's my point. If we don't choose to make time for care, self-care, the body will make that decision for you. And it will make you more vulnerable to disease, or more vulnerable to accidents, or more vulnerable to whatever things life brings your way, that then you don't have a choice to go to work either. So this is that aha moment. Well, I can choose to take this time and care for myself, and the people in my life love that because I'm tending to myself, and I'm happier because I am, and they get to receive that benefit. And to me, it's a trial and error process. Like, how important is the paying the rent on time? And literally, like, how do we decide? Is it more important that in this moment, that I take a break from this so-called deadline to get something done, to get paid, to get done, to feed my kids? Or is it immediately, I need to be kinder to myself, and as I'm kinder to myself, I'm kinder to my kids, and they get benefit out of that. They may have a hungry belly, but they have a happy mommy and a happy life, you know? So that is a big picture look at what you're talking about. And
And I
it's
think, part of that is, like we were talking about the ancestral side of things. It's our DNA. It's how genetically we are predetermined to be in a particular way. It's that survival mode, isn't it?
yeah.
And for any of us that are listening to the call, have their parents or grandparents have been through adversity, whether it's a war, whether it was having to leave
Immigration.
homes, yeah, whether it was violence, divorce, whatever it was, where they had traumatic events in their lives that they weren't able to heal from, then that can be passed down. That trauma is passed down. We know through data of epigenetics, which, going back to Bruce Lipton's work, we know that epigenetically that gets passed down. There's a lovely lady who's done some incredible work on Holocaust survivors and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And what she's shown is that the nervous systems of Holocaust survivors are completely different, where they are programmed to be in that flight, fight, freeze, so they're in that sympathetic state much more so than average. That's how they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that in my family with immigration and how that's carried down, where you basically put all the things that are important to you, whatever you can carry, and that's it. You're leaving your history behind, except for the things you can carry and the trauma in that. I think the thing that I would like to hear is, how do you talk to the other side, Nicci? How do you, what is it in the work that you do that allows you to not talk with the mold, but talk to the great grandfather? And in that conversation with the great grandfather, can you feel it? Like the resolution from his being, wherever that being is that you're talking to, and then that experience of that being's processing, healing, whatever you want to call it, and how it affects you in the present. I
Yeah.
mean, that's your work, right?
Yeah. So when I trained in craniosacral therapy, we had to, as part of our course, see a number of clients, practice clients a week. And I was seeing about 8 people a week, and they would come in, and in would come their ancestors. So I'd be sitting there and thinking, hang on a minute, who are these people that, I can sense that are in the room? And it wasn't until about 5 years later that this lovely cranial osteopath, Mary Bolingbroke, she taught a course on ancestral cranial, and I had such a block to going. Literally the day before, I phoned the organizer and I said, I really don't want to be on this course, but I really think I need to. So, and she said, oh, someone's dropped out. So I jumped on it, and it's completely changed my practice. So often, clients just find me. I'll give you an example. I had this client who every springtime, so April, May, she couldn't sleep for about 3 months. Her father was a German soldier in the Second World War, a Nazi German soldier in the Second World War. And she said that she follows the Steiner philosophy, anthroposophy philosophy, and she said when people die, we believe that they start walking back through their lives, right, to understand their lives from spirit. And she said, I think my father has got to the stage where it's the Second World War. And so I said, okay, well, we can work with him and see if there's any trauma that needs to be relieved and released. And so she lies down on the couch, normal craniosacral therapy session. And I ask if her father would like to come in. And he comes in, and I see that the back of his head is really damaged from a bullet, and he's lost his right ear. And I said, oh, gosh, he's got really bad head trauma. She said, can you see him? I said, yeah, he's right here. And she said, yeah, he was shot in the back of the head. And luckily, he survived. And what he needed is he really needed to ask for forgiveness. And so he came in and he just wanted to ask forgiveness for all the people that he had killed, that he had hurt. It was absolutely beautiful. He was in floods of tears. He was so distraught. But he needed to let that go. He needed to release that. And it was a really beautiful, deep session. And the client, who's a neighbor of mine in the village here, you know, I saw her on the road the next day, and she flagged down my car and she said, "Nicci, I slept last night and I have no more anxiety. I don't know what you did, but it has really helped, and I'm so grateful that my father is able to be at rest." And so that's what I do. I tune into, often clients come and they might have a bad knee, or then they have a bad shoulder, and the pain moves around the body, and I'm like, it's not all theirs, you know, it's pain that's coming through from the other side, and it needs to be resolved. And so what we do is we invite in an ancestor who is associated with the symptoms, the pain, whatever it might be. And I tune into the ancestor, and they come in with what I call a feeling tone, which could be anything from abject rage through to sorrow. And often it moves. So if there is a lot of anger and rage, then often behind that is a lot of pain, a lot of fear. And I'm working with the client, you know, where the pain is, or you know, where the symptom is, and then at the same time I'm reflecting and working with the ancestor that's associated with that condition.
Oh.
And we come to a place of resolution, and it's really beautiful. I've worked with now hundreds and hundreds of clients like this, and I teach ancestral cranial work now. It's very beautiful. And now I'm beginning to teach ancestral cranial to my clients. Actually, there's a number of people that would really like to connect with what we call their gateway ancestors. So everybody has an ancestor that is the gateway to the other side. And the veil is so thin. You know, we think that people have passed, and in many cultures today, we still revere the dead. We still have those beautiful ceremonies for the dead. But sadly, in many cultures, we've forgotten those ceremonies. And so it's really beautiful to come into connection with our ancestry, understand the nervous system of the ancestry, and then in supporting our ancestors to heal, so we support ourselves to heal.
Wow. I'm just this conversation, Nicci, I have tapped into feelings in my body and thoughts in my mind of ancestors that I have known from photographs, but not in person. I can feel the reality of what you're describing, that it's possible. And I'm curious now. Like, I want to spend more time with myself and see what shows up in that way. How do you coach people to start? Do you have to find a guide like yourself, or can you just find a book, or how do you do that?
I mean, there's loads of books. There's, of course, Dr. Gabor Mate, The Hungry Ghost, which is fabulous. There's Mark Wolwin's work, It Didn't Start With You, is a really fantastic book. Thomas Hubel's work, he's done so much incredible work in intergenerational trauma and ancestral healing. I did his 5-month course. It was amazing. Thousands of people were on it. I think the time is now. You know, unless we heal the trauma of the past, we cannot address what's happening now and in the future. And history will repeat itself again and again until we learn. It's so important to do this work now. And in terms of how I guide people, you know, I've done workshops in all sorts of places like Soho House and all sorts of places. And I take people on a journey. So I guide them through this lovely meditation where they go and meet their gateway ancestor, and they sit and they have a conversation with this person. And it's so lovely that even the most skeptical person always gets information. They definitely get a feeling tone. And actually, it's often the skeptics that afterwards are the ones that are, you know, really touched by what they saw. Yeah, it's really beautiful, really
Maybe
beautiful
you
work.
can share a workshop in the Inner Teacher Academy.
I'd love to. I'd love to. Yeah. Yeah.
All over it.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Nicci, it's been a pleasure as always. I'm feeling very grateful that I get to see you in March next year, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. And
Yeah.
I wish you the best. I look forward to having you back here on the podcast season 2.
Yeah. Let's do it. Great.
Let's do
Lovely.
it.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Lovely to meet you. And
Thank you. Lovely
yeah,
to meet you too.
yeah.
That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.